Good evening. Welcome to the August meeting of the Salem Keizer Transit Board. This evening's agenda, we have several items that are of interest. We have presentations on the Healthiest Employers Wellness Award and also a legislative update on the recent Legislative Assembly. We'll have a period for public comment, and then our consent calendar includes the minutes of the July 27th meeting, and then we will have some action items, approval of a contract extension for security services, award a contract for capital project management services, approval of service enhancement public input plan, and appointment of board members to committee assignments. Then we will have some informational items about some service changes occurring in September, and then our normal reports. With that, I would like to call the meeting to order and call on Director Bush to lead us in the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Linda, would you note attendance, please? And with that, are there any announcements or changes to the agenda? Moving forward, then, we have two presentations, and I'll call on our General Manager to introduce the first one.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Michael Majors to please come forward and introduce the first presentation.
President Krebs and members of the board, the Curious Wellness Program was developed and implemented last year as one of the district's strategic priorities. The Wellness Committee, I thought they're going to come up with me. The Wellness Committee has worked diligently to develop an innovative and cost-effective program which has engaged staff across all departments and helped to control the cost of insurance, along with decreasing workplace injuries. The program is funded through a dividend reimbursement we receive from our workers' compensation insurance carrier, Safecore. Last Thursday, we were invited to and attended the Portland Business Journal's Human Resources Summit and Healthiest Employers of Oregon Award in Portland. It was at this luncheon that I am honored to officially announce that Chariots was named as one of the healthiest employers in the state of Oregon. Placing 8th in an overall category of 100 to 499 employees, which had a considerable amount of competition, but it leaves us some room for next year. This success reflects upon the hard work of the Wellness Committee and all the staff that participate in the program. We have seen great success and can see how the programs have improved the lives of our fellow employees. So, on behalf of the Wellness Committee, you see represented with me tonight, we are honored to present to you, the Board of Directors, the employees, and citizens of our district, the Healthiest Employer of Oregon Award from the Portland Business Journal.
One, two, three. Thanks.
Thank you.
Wow, that's cool.
Pretty cool.
I might say that it's the people that work together on our staff that result in these awards being given, and we just basically collect them and then hang them on the wall to show. And we don't hang them on our wall, we hang them on your wall so that you can enjoy them when you see them too. So thank you. And we're ready for our next presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the legislative session recently ended, so we've asked our legislative advocacy group, CFM, to present an update on the session, and so I'll turn it over to Dale Penn, who represents us.
Thank you very much. This work okay for? Okay, perfect. So thank you again, Dale Penn with CFM. Wanted to thank you very much for allowing CFM to represent Salem Keizer Transit in the building. 2017 was a challenging but rewarding year for transit all over the state. We'll go into some good detail later on about that. But I wanted to take a minute just to reintroduce everyone to your CFM team. So, you need to be closer. Is this better? Okay. So take a minute to reintroduce everyone to myself, and then also to Tess Emilio, who's not here tonight, but also to Zach Reeves, who joined us recently. And so I want to give Zach a minute just to introduce himself and say a little bit about his experience.
As Dale said, my name's Zach Reeves. I am the newest member of CFM. I started with CFM on the very first day of the legislative session, February 1st. Prior to coming to work with Dale and Tess, I spent 4 years as Chief of Staff for Senator Lee Byer, who was part of the transportation stuff. So that is my kind of background in this arena. I'm excited. You know, it was a fun session to get to get to dig into the lobbying world, and I look forward to representing you guys going forward.
Thank you. All right. So the 2017 overview. We entered 2017 with a pretty massive budget deficit. We started with a $1.8 billion deficit. That impacted literally every agency, every program area in the state. The bulk of that budget deficit really came about because of increases into our Oregon's Medicaid costs, as well as the public employee retirement system. So the impact to all of the different agencies definitely impacts Salem Keizer as well, because that impacted several of our priorities. Before session, we had Measure 97, which was a petition to raise anywhere from $3 to $6 billion of new revenue to help the state out with this massive budget deficit. That was a $40 million campaign, the largest amount of money spent on any kind of ballot measure in Oregon's history. It failed. It did not bring in new revenue, and as such, we entered session with this deficit, and really impacted a lot of the conversations we could have. The governor and the legislative leadership were able to kind of dig ourselves out of that $1.8 billion deficit through a series of tax increases on different entities, healthcare entities, as well as some cost-cutting measures. And so one of the other big issues for this session, of course, for everyone here is the transportation package, House Bill 2017. This was, and we'll go into greater detail about this later, but this was the largest investment in transportation in general in Oregon's history. It's the largest tax increase in Oregon's history, but and also for us, a historic investment in transit services throughout the state. So we'll get into that in a little bit as well. Revenue reform. So because of Measure 97's failure and our huge budget deficit, there was a strong conversation in the building around what does revenue, new revenue, look like for Oregon. So we'll talk a little bit about that later, but Senator Mark Hass, the legislator from Beaverton, led the conversation with stakeholders around what does revenue reform look like, what does it need to look like. And so over the course of several months, he led a committee that tackled this issue and produced almost 20 different versions of a revenue package that contains some core components. One, it would have looked at a corporate activities tax, would have reduced the personal income tax, and it would have eliminated the corporate income tax to break down some of the loopholes that are currently existing and to simplify the system. A joint letter released late in session by Senator Courtney, Representative Kotek, Speaker Kotek, and the governor indicated that there was not the political will to push revenue reform across the finish line, and so they pushed that off until 2019, although I fully expect those conversations before 2019 to continue. So we'll keep hearing about this issue going forward. So let's talk for a couple minutes about Salem Keizer Transit's legislative priorities. So first and foremost, we wanted to ensure that the transportation package, if it moved across the finish line, contained the vital, necessary transit investments that we need. We worked with legislative champions, worked with stakeholders in order to secure that. But going into session, despite it being bipartisan, supported by both parties, both bicameral, supported by both chambers, this was a really tough sell and a really tough argument to have in the building. The continuation of the state employee bus pass program. This was one that back in 2016 we were able to secure an allocation from state funds to restart that program. And so that was one of our other legislative priorities. We wanted to make sure that would continue. The other issue is the transferability of existing and expiring EITCs or energy incentive tax credits. Zach will talk about that in a little bit. But we wanted to, Salem Keizer Transit is the owner of 2 of these tax credits. And so we wanted to make sure that the way they were valued when they were originally distributed has been labeled as faulty and very, very difficult to sell. So we wanted to figure out a way to help out Salem Keizer Transit, other nonprofits and government entities that have these expiring tax credits, and try to help them out, try to allow them to sell them. And then lastly, the senior and disabled transit investments. We wanted to make sure those continued because Salem Keizer Transit is a distributor of those funds. Some of the other issues we talked a little bit about monitoring at the lower level included monitoring any conversations around CMAQ funding. This was an issue that we dealt with pre-session. We wanted to make sure if the legislature talked about this, we were aware of it and we participated in those conversations. As well as making sure we track the VW settlement as that moves through the system. Right now we're currently waiting, the Department of Justice and various state agencies are trying to hash out how that trust fund will be distributed, how it will be made up. That's something we're monitoring. There's no update as of right now, but we'll continue to update this group as things happen. So I think Salem Keizer would be very interested in utilizing that, as with other transit districts in the state, on low or no emission vehicles. So House Bill 2017, the transportation package was something that, like I mentioned, came into session, very strong support from many sides, from quite a few individuals. But this was born out of failed attempts back in 2015 to enact change. That particular package in 2015 did not have what I would call a robust transit investment that would have benefited all transit districts in the state. So that was one of our goals going into 2017, was making sure that whatever House Bill 27 created or put in there for transit, it was robust. It impacted not only Salem Keizer Transit, TriMet and Lane, but also many of the other transit districts throughout the state who don't have the kind of representation that you guys do and others have in the building. So what does 2016 look? After 2015, the conversations stymied in the building, the governors created a transportation vision panel, went around the state, and many of the people here on this board attended one of those meetings in Keizer to educate the governor and policymakers on what are the important issues that a transportation package needs to include. And so some of those things, they held their meetings, and at the end of it, they released a report. And that report said that there are 3 main issues that a transportation package needs to tackle. It needs to tackle congestion, it needs to tackle seismic preparedness, and it needs to tackle transit. So that was a very key part of the discussion on 2017's path for success. The other issue is the joint committee. This is the committee that was created in the interim, led by Senator Beyer, Representative McEwen, and several others, to travel the state, learn what the constituents and individuals all throughout Oregon needed from their transportation package, and that group morphed into the committee work and the committee that we participated with and worked with to pass 2017 in the session. So some of the key barrier issues that we faced, as I list out there, in no particular order, is around the low carbon fuel standard, making sure that if we had to in some way provide some kind of mitigation or some kind of compromise there in order to get stakeholders supportive. Addressing regressivity and equity. This in many ways is a tax increase, and low-income vulnerable populations are disproportionately impacted often by tax increases. So how do we craft a package that is respectful of those populations, that provides services and enhancements that justify tax increases? And then some of the other issues, making sure the gas tax increase isn't too high, and making sure that urban and rural projects are are adequately addressed, that divide doesn't get too big. So the major components of the package. We'll talk about the second one, the transit investment, the payroll tax, in a minute. But this is a $5.3 billion package that over 6 years and into the future. It has an up to a 10-cent gas tax increase. That will be the first amount of that would start right away, and then after that, each subsequent increase up to that 10-cent limit will have to be justified. I do want to say one thing before I go on. Salem Keizer Transit was a real key player in these conversations from the get-go. Along with our stakeholders in the Transit Association, TriMet, Lane, Rogue, and many other entities, we were on point, we were respectful, we were considerate, and we were thoughtful in our answers and our approach to this issue in the building. We got a lot of thank yous from leadership and from others around how we comported ourselves and the messaging that we brought forward and our thoughtful approach to this solution, to this issue. In particular, I wanted to point out that Alan and Marcia Beyer, who came down and testified in front of the legislative committee about 3/4 of the way through session, did a fantastic job. They won over legislative advocates with their testimony. Marcia did so by addressing equity and regressivity in her comments about whether or not vulnerable populations would accept a payroll tax. And she was very strong in her support of that. And then Alan, in particular, because of his closing testimony statement around how many days Salem Keizer has been without weekend service, and asking them not to make it another certain parameter, a certain threshold, not to reach that next threshold. We need the support. That was very powerful testimony. It was very helpful. So, along with the 10-cent gas tax increase, there's some vehicle registration fee increases, a privilege tax on new car sales. In addition to that, there's going to be some restructuring in how the Oregon Transportation Commission manages ODOT, how they have the ability to choose the director working with the governor. There's some big changes on Connect Oregon, how that is calculated, how that's distributed. Transit is no longer a component of Connect Oregon. And then there's some also conversations on congestion relief around tolling on the I-5 and 205 corridors. So let's talk about the transit component. That's the most important one for this body. 0.1% of a payroll tax on wages paid to employees. The proceeds will be deposited in the statewide Transportation Improvement Fund, or the STIF. It will be distributed out based upon need and application. 90% to transit providers, qualified entities that meet certain parameters in their that have to prepare and submit a public transportation improvement plan to the OTC. And then once that's approved, 90% will be distributed out to transit providers to tackle increasing frequency of bus services to low-income neighborhoods, purchasing buses powered by natural gas or electricity, and a whole host of other parameters as well. This is definitely not an entitlement. It's something we will need to continue to show our value, show legislators and the public that their trust in us is warranted. The accountability metrics will be required. We'll need to make sure we track how this money is spent, how it's utilized, and I think Salem Keizer is well positioned to do that. One other big issue, the tax collection starts for this particular payroll tax on July 1 of 2018. The first allocation, Department of Revenue will need to go through rules making process, but it will not start being allocated out to districts until January 1. So we need to use that timeline effectively, and I know we will, to communicate with our community, figure out what services they need, and then work towards improving that. And I think, like I said, Salem Keizer is well positioned. They've already started doing that work, and you guys are going to do a fantastic job at that, I know. The impact for Salem Keizer Transit is substantial. The estimate, based upon our current figures, and these are based on the most recent numbers we have from the Department of Revenue, is $7.386 million in 2018-2019 biennium. And then the total over 9 years is around $85.762 million. So that is going to do a lot of good for the people who use transit in Salem and Keizer and the outlying areas. the STIF fund. Like I mentioned, this is going to require a lot of work from the Department of Revenue, from ODOT, and from stakeholders and the Transportation Commission to get this right. So I know that we're going to start up as of this last month the rulemaking process. We need to work out a STIF implementation work plan. We need to make sure we continue to engage stakeholders, not only transit but other riders, everyone else, and a communications plan around how this is going to be implemented. Finally, OTC needs to reach concurrence on this rulemaking plan before moving forward. And then in August this month and going through July of next year, they're going to be developing what's that 90% formula look like. What is the 5% formula that creates the discretionary fund, the grant program similar to Connect Oregon but for transit only? What does that look like? What are the requirements for that? And then the 4%, which goes towards intercity connectivity. How is that going to work? All of this will be developed over the next few months, and we're going to be active in monitoring and participating in those conversations. So that is the transportation package. I wanted to stop for a minute and see if there are any questions and comments, anything we can focus on before we move on to our other issues.
Yes, Director Kelly.
A couple or three things. The Area Commission on Transportation, MWAC, also met with the Joint Committee in May of 2016, as well as that special meeting. So there was an opportunity to meet with folks. Senator Jackie Winters was on the bigger committee. She's one of our legislators, and we should acknowledge her. And then the other big acknowledgement should go to Senator Brian Boquist and Representative Cliff Bentz, who were very instrumental, very engaged, and very hands-on in the whole project. And with funding, there is funding, I believe, from a $15 fee on the sale of bicycles over $200 and 26 inches or something. They don't want to have a fee on kids' bikes, but they wanted some skin in the game for the bicycle community, and that is, I believe, supposed to go to bike and ped improvements.
Yes.
And those bike and ped improvements can help transit districts across the state, because if you don't have a good way to get to the bus stop, you don't go to the bus stop. And if you have good pedestrian and bike, you can get to the transit stops.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The money allocated from the new tax on bicycles over $200 will go towards those safe path. Sorry, what's that?
Fee, I believe.
The fee, yeah, sorry, not tax, fee. It's also joined by some additional investments pulling from the registration fees and the gas tax increase around safe routes to schools. So those will also help our transit riders substantially get to the buses in a safe manner, especially those who maybe have physical disabilities. And I do want to thank Marcia for bringing up another point. I would be remiss if I didn't show my appreciation and acknowledge the work that Senator Brian Boquist did from Dallas, Representative Bentz, Jackie Winters, as well as Senator Peter Courtney, whose office helped push this across the finish line. All individuals who have shown commitment to investing in transit. Senator Courtney in particular, a huge supporter of ours, and he deserves they all deserve a round of applause for their work and their difficulty on this.
The governor's office needs to be thanked too.
Yes, the governor's office helped push us across the finish line. Nick Blosser, the chief of staff, I don't think this would be a success without his direct involvement in his work to address concerns of stakeholders in the final 2 weeks of session. So definitely. And Carmen Fuller, the transportation advisor to the governor as well, did a lot of work on this. So the state employee bus pass program, as everyone will recall, back in 2015 we had made some attempts. In 2016 we were successful in securing about $700,000 total of allocations from the legislature to help restart the state employee bus pass program. This is a program that was in effect during the late 2000s and was stopped in 2009 or 2010 because of budget concerns. So we were able to get that allocation. We did our best to, during the interim, work up data and metrics so that we brought those pieces of information back to legislators to show them the impact the bus pass program is having. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, the $1.8 billion deficit required many agencies to turn in budgets with substantial reductions. This was one of those programs and services that, while vital, ended up on the cutting room floor early or late in December when the governor released her recommended budget, or late November of last year. We worked with DAS, we worked with legislators, we educated them, but unfortunately we're unable to receive the allocation to continue that program in 2018. One other kind of additional issue with the conversations on the state-appointed bus pass program was that I think many legislators and other stakeholders saw the historic investments in 2017 as their push for transit investments. And so this was unfortunately one of the kind of the byproducts was that we were not able to get this across the finish line. So, but we will continue conversations. We're going to see if we can get this kick-started again next year. So I'll turn it over to Zach now to talk about the EITC.
And so the energy incentive tax credit is one that has been an ongoing issue for us. The tax credit allows entities to, or allowed entities to, purchase energy incentive or energy efficient vehicles, perform energy efficiency upgrades, and then the non-tax entities were able to sell them off to tax entities at some sort of discounted rate. And that rate was to be determined by a formulary set by the Oregon Department of Energy. And the formulary, due to the recession, shot up to a point that entities that had taken out these tax credits were unable to sell them. And so that left groups like Salem Keizer Transit holding these tax credits and unable to sell them for 90 plus cents on the dollar. And so we, early on, pre-session, began working on a fix to this to allow groups such as ourselves to sell these tax credits to taxed entities. And so we worked with the League of Cities, the Association of Oregon Counties, and City of Portland on a fix for this. The City of Portland has a rather large tax credit, Yamhill County, the Oregon Military Department, and others. So there was kind of a significant stakeholder group that we had built a coalition to focus on this issue. And it's an issue that needs to be explained in depth to legislators, and one that is not an elevator speech, and that can be a difficult thing to get passed in the Capitol due to the kind of fast-paced nature. And so we started early educating legislators and meeting with them to explain the issue. And I think to a person, there was no disagreement on the policy. It came down to a budgetary issue. And we introduced House Bill 3032 along with the City of Portland, League of Cities, Association of Oregon Counties, as an attempted fix to this, and we worked with Legislative Council to hone it down to minimize the budget impact. And we had overwhelming policy support from legislators, chairs of committees, and the budget impact in a budget climate such as we were was too much. The 3032 had a hearing. Dale did a fantastic job of presenting Salem Keizer's case, and I think it got wrapped up in with the transportation package as one more kind of just too much money going out the door in a climate where we just didn't have it. And we work closely with the Department of Energy, and it's a difficult sell given the constant negative publicity that is coming out around energy-related tax credits. Just a couple months ago, the most recent kind of round of news with the Betsy and the new charges there. So it's a difficult conversation to have given the negative publicity associated with energy-related tax credits, but it's one that we will continue to continue the conversation with stakeholders because we still have this tax credit, and it's still there are other stakeholders who are in the same position that we are, and will continue to look to the legislature for a way to fix this, and hopefully in a future session there can be opportunities for that.
And the one thing I'll add to that is that 3032, we did amend that to take that into account, that we may have an opportunity in future sessions to do that. We made some changes to pull the budget impact, as Zach mentioned, focused in on government entities, nonprofits, and whatnot. So it does allow for a soft sunset and allows for grandfather of existing or expired credits in order to take part of that. So senior and disabled transit funding. We, back in 2013, a group of stakeholders made some changes to the senior medical tax deduction, which yielded a particular amount. Oregon was, I think, the last state that had a tax deduction of this kind. It was originally created to impact low-income individuals, but it was being utilized by high-income seniors. And so legislative leadership made some changes, capped it, means tested the program. That and those savings to the state yielded a particular amount of money that was, half of it was supposed to go back into senior and disabled services. And a good chunk of that we were able to allocate into senior and disabled transit, of which Salem Keizer Transit is a distributor. So since then, you'll notice that in 2011, 2013, the third column in that graph is pre-changes to the senior medical tax deduction. The red section is general fund dollars, which is where this money from the senior medical tax deduction would flow from. 2013, 2015, you'll notice a substantial increase of around $10.5 million. That was the direct result of work on the senior medical tax deduction. In the 2015-2017 session, we were able to get allocated about $9.4 million of additional investments, holding legislators to their senior promise. Going forward, ODOT, I think, recognizes, and I've got to give appreciation to them, they recognize the importance of this particular service to low-income vulnerable populations, and they have tried to build this amount of funding into their budget going forward. It's not a guarantee. The legislators who agreed to the senior promise are leaving. Over every year we lose more of them. So that's going to be under intense scrutiny, may not be available in the future, but for this biennium we were able to secure at least a comparable amount of money for senior and disabled transit. So I want to stop there and see if there are any questions on any of these issues that we've talked about so far.
Any questions? Oh, Director Kelly?
Yesterday's announcement about the kicker going back with about $460 million, I think they're anticipating about $460 million. What kind of pressure is that going to put on the legislature with a $460 million goal?
Well, the legislature ended, that's a really good question. The legislature ended this year, legislative budget writers kind of assumed that that kicker was going to be part of the equation. It doesn't impact our current biennium at all. It does impact the conversation going forward in future bienniums. So that is a question going forward we will have to answer. On top of that, we have the conversation we'll talk about in a few minutes of ballot referrals around healthcare ballot referrals, which could impact the budget as well. So right now, this biennium, we're fine, but going forward, it definitely changes the landscape, the budget in the next two bienniums, because of the skewed forecast is definitely an issue we need to be worried about. And I don't have an answer how to fix that. If I did, I think a lot of people would be calling me.
We're the only state that does this incredibly weird thing. And our bond ratings sometimes get reduced because we're the only people who send back money to people just because the economists missed by 0.6% on how much money was going to come in 2 years ago.
And we send all of it back. So yeah, you're right. It's there's always a conversation when a kicker kicks. The last two years we've had that happen, and so we've continued to have conversations around, do we want to change the kicker? Right now, the corporate kicker, when it kicks, it goes into the school fund. Do we want to do something like that? Do we want to change our laws? I don't know. It's a tough one because I think the public perception is I'd rather get $400 or $200 back on my taxes, or $89, or if you're the 1%, $5,000. So yes, it's definitely an issue. So looking ahead, what do we need to do to be successful going forward? We definitely need to continue identifying the issues we want to tackle. We want to make sure that anything we bring to the legislature, we have solid data and metrics and analytics behind that. Develop communication strategy involving our advocate friends who have been helpful on issues in the past. Legislator outreach. This is an ongoing issue. The legislature, the House of Representatives, they have elections every 2 years. The turnover there is huge, so making sure that we continue to educate our lawmakers is going to be important. The State Employee Bus Pass program, we want to see if there's a path forward to be successful there. Implementation of House Bill 2017, as I mentioned before, that's something that a lot of stakeholders, a lot of individuals, legislators are going to be watching the transit districts to see how we implement that. We need to do that successfully. Senate Bill 10, this was an issue, as you remember, Senate President Peter Courtney came and talked to us about pre-session. This is a bill of his that would change the governance structure of Salem Keizer Transit and also to allow the governor to appoint board members, as well as change the taxing structure to more closely resemble what TriMet and Lane have, which is the ability of the transit district to tax. So that is something that had no public hearing, had a couple discussions, but nothing official for Senate Bill 10 this year, but we're going to continue to monitor that issue as it goes forward. We need to continue to increase and improve our community relationships with City of Salem, with the Chamber and others, because we want to go hand in hand as we develop this plan for 2017 implementation. We want to make sure that we have conversations and open dialogue, and monitor CMAQ funding. And I'll let Zach talk just a second about the TNC legislation.
And as Dale said, I think we can fully expect the TNC legislation to come back in one way, shape, or form in the coming sessions. There was a suite of bills introduced around this issue in terms of how to regulate them, both from the TNC side and then from the taxi side, who are in competition with them. Those bills had a hearing. The main issue centers around regulating them statewide and preempting local jurisdictions, such as the City of Salem, from regulating them in any way, shape, or form. And so that is likely to come back in the 2018 session, pushed by Uber and Lyft, and the taxis companies will have their own set of bills that will come back, but it's not a fight that's likely to be settled anytime soon.
Yeah.
You might say what TNC stands for.
Sorry, it's transportation network companies such as Uber and Lyft and those ride hailing apps.
All right, so what does the 2017-2018 political outlook look like? So just so you know, 2018 legislature starts February 5th. That is 165 days from now. It seems like a long time. It is not. We start hearing about legislative concepts that legislators are going to work on pretty much now. They have some filing deadlines that they have around legislation in the next couple months, and we'll hear more then. And then a big stack of bills will be released early January, where we're going to need to sit down with Alan and his team and look through and see which ones impact Salem Keizer Transit and transit in general. But 165 days from now, we're going to be back in session. So and it's a short session, 35 days. It'll go into early March. Can go 35 days. We can also end early. So between now and then, we have potential referrals and ballot measures, which definitely impact us. House Bill 2391, it's a healthcare provider tax. That's one of the ways we hope to fill that $1.8 billion budget deficit. That one is currently, the attempt is to refer that. If they are successful referring that, the provider tax stops as we know it in some form, and we may have a huge budget hole in early February to address. So while it doesn't directly impact transit, it does impact the budget as a whole, and those conversations will be complicated if that is successful. The other one is just the transportation package. There is every day less of a likelihood of a referral. There's always a chance that an entity could bring a cogent argument against it, but due to the work of Nick Blosser, due to the work of the governor's office and stakeholders, Peter Courtney and everyone else, most of the stakeholders who had a concern with the package their concerns were addressed, and so we fully expected that we will not have a problem with that going forward. And then I'll turn it over to Zach to talk a little bit about the gubernatorial race and the legislature, and then we'll answer questions.
Thanks, Dale. So it might seem like we just had a gubernatorial race, and we did in 2016, and that race was to fill out the remainder of former Governor Kitzhaber's term, which Kate Brown won that, so she is serving for 2 years. She's up again in 2018, and will be running again, and her challenger so far on the Republican side seems to be current State Representative Newt Bueller, who's a doctor from Penn. He seems to have the support lining up behind him. He just received a rather large donation from Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, and his most likely challenger, current Secretary of State Dennis Richardson, who was just elected in 2016, just announced this week that he will not be running. So at this point, it's a two-horse race, but things can certainly change between now and November of 2018. As for the legislature, the Republicans will continue to look to pick up seats in both the House and the Senate. The Democrats have a overwhelming majority in both chambers, and House members are up every 2 years, so all House members are up again. 4 have announced that they will not be returning or have been or are vacated their seats for other reason. Former Representative Ann Leininger was appointed as a Clackamas County judge by Governor Kate Brown. Representative John Huffman out in the Dalles and Eastern Oregon, he is not running for re-election. He's seeking a position in the Trump administration. And Representative Bueller is running for governor, so he will not be back. And the final one is Representative Sal Esquivel from down in Medford, who is retiring. And those are the only 4 who have publicly announced that they will not be returning. On the Senate side, there will be several interesting races. Both Salem senators will be up again. So Senator Peter Courtney is up for re-election, as is Senator Jackie Winters. Neither of them have made an official declaration as to whether or not they will be returning. And then another race of interest to Salem Keizer Transit is Senate District 13, which is currently held by Kim Thatcher, and it's most of Keizer and goes all the way up into the Portland metro area. So that's one to watch. Senate District 15, which is out in Hillsborough, is Chuck Riley. He won that race by a very, very narrow margin in 2014 over incumbent Senator Bruce Starr. So that's one that there'll likely be a lot of money dumped into on both sides. And the final one is Senate District 20, which is in Canby. Democrats have a slight registration edge there. It's currently held by a Republican, Senator Alan Olson, and that is likely to be a close race as well.
So we bring this up just mainly to say that because the Democrats have such an overwhelming majority, they are one vote off in both chambers to having what we call a supermajority, allow them to pass tax measures without any of the Republican votes. So that is why we talk about these, and we have to monitor all these races to see what happens, because that can directly impact taxing authority, can impact just about everything. So I'll turn it over. That's the last we have. Any questions or comments? Or
Yes, Director Lincoln.
Just a little question. As far as administrative rules for the transit, distributing the transit money, do you know if the first draft of that is going to come from like the ODOT Rail and Transit Division, perhaps those folks?
I don't know for certain. I know that the timeline for that, I don't know, Alan, if you know.
I can interject a little. So actually tomorrow, so I'm the chair of the Public Transit Advisory Committee. Our executive committee is meeting tomorrow to discuss that. It should. I do know that the OTA Legislative Committee, which Dale represents us on, is part of that process. And the PTAC will have a group, and because we're so close, we'll be actively involved in it, but it'll come through ODOT first.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I think it was an exciting, oh, yes. Director Kelly.
It's my understanding that there may be a work group on urban renewal. You might,
I'm sorry,
urban
what?
renewal,
Urban renewal.
and you might talk to Wendy Johnson about that.
Okay.
Director Roger, oh, sorry.
I don't think that they would be pointing for 2018, but it would be good since we are impacted by Salem's urban renewal.
Okay.
Director Rogers.
You were talking about how as many stakeholders as possible were, smoothed over all of their concerns, but there were still some who might say, well, we're going to challenge this. Well, what are some of the reasons somebody would be challenging it?
Well, there may be some stakeholders or some individuals who feel like the gas tax increase is too high, that the taxes that they pay as part of this package, because as we mentioned, this is the largest tax increase in Oregon history, that in general, in principle, they don't appreciate that or they don't agree with that. So there are a host of reasons that tie directly to taxes that an individual could have a concern with it. But the major stakeholders, those with the traditional funding, backing, grassroots capabilities to oppose something of this magnitude, were the majority of their concerns, I think, were addressed as per I mentioned with those conversations with the governor's office to lead the session.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good question, though.
And our general manager would like to make a comment.
Yeah, I do have a few comments I'd like to make. First, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't thank the CFM group. Dale and Tess and Zach were there every day for us, working the halls. Well, we were there in important hearings and on transit day. Those are the important days for us there. But when we're not there, they were there taking care of us. You can see we've had some victories. We've had some areas that were disappointing, but we're stepping right back up and going after them. But just know that we were represented well, and I'd like to personally thank them for the work they did on behalf of not only us, but the residents of this community whose lives were going to change because of the new transportation package.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think we all thank you because this is going to be a very important milestone to have this funding in place so that we can serve our community the way we've been trying to for the last decade.
So thank you very much. It was a team effort and we enjoyed representing you guys in the Capitol. So thank you.
Thank you. We've come to the period for public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak? Yes, sir. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes, so if you just step up and identify yourself and
Just the height a little bit. Right?
yes.
Hello to the board of Salem Keizer Chariots. My name is, sorry about that. My name is,
You can stand back because it's really.
yeah, you're the reverberation expert. My name is Aaron Wiesenfeld, and I'm a Willamette University student. I'm Jerry, Patricia, now Steve know me a little bit. But the gentleman from CFM actually reminded me of something. I did not intend to speak today, but a mentor, former professor, and a great friend of mine was on the Oregon Governor's Transportation Vision Panel. His name was Raleigh Wisbrock. He was a former professor at Willamette University who recently just passed from terminal cancer. So there was an obituary recently released. I just wanted to inform the board that a memorial service will be held October 1st, I believe. So if you're interested or if you knew Raleigh Wisbrock in any way, and I'm still a little bit emotional about that because he's a close friend of mine, feel free to attend his service or contact Willamette University. That's it.
Okay. Thank you. Our next item is the consent calendar.
Move approval of the consent calendar?
Second.
Been moved and second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. And we have several action items. So the first item is approval of contract extension for security services. And I'll have our general manager introduce.
Thank you. So Karen Garcia, our Security and Emergency Management Manager, will present the staff report.
Good evening, President Krebs and members of the board. You do have to stand back. As Alan mentioned, I'm Karen Garcia. I'm the Security and Emergency Management Manager for Chariots, and tonight I'm here to talk about a contract extension for security services for Chariots. Shall the board authorize the general manager to execute a 4-month contract extension with G4S Secure Solutions Incorporated to provide security services at the Keizer Transit Center and the Downtown Transit Center here at Courthouse Square? So a year ago, back in August of 2016, the board approved a contract amendment with G4S Secure Solutions, who is currently providing our security services. That contract amendment was for a period of 1 year, from September 4th of 2016 through September 3rd of this year. In preparation to re-procure security services contract, we did a thorough review of the existing contract, and we wanted to ensure that the new request for proposals adequately met the performance requirements and needs of the district and was a cost-effective proposal draft for contractors to propose for us. In order to continue the security services without interruption while we go through the process of selecting a successor contract, we need to extend the current contract from September 4th of this year just through the end of the calendar year, December 31st. So that would be a 4-month extension. We reached out to G4S, and they were willing to extend the contract at the current billing rates. Those billing rates are listed in the first table in your board memo. The 4-month period has a not-to-exceed amount of $87,792.25. As far as the financial impact, security services was included in the budget process for the fiscal year 18 budget, so those funds are there and available. The recommendation is that the board authorize the general manager to execute a 4-month contract extension with G4S Secure Solutions Incorporated for the period of September 4th of 2017 through December 31st of 2017 in the amount of $87,792.25. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Do we have a motion?
I'll do it. I move the board authorize the general manager to execute a 4-month contract extension with G4S Secure Solutions Incorporated for the period September 4, 2017 to December 31, 2017 in the amount of $87,792.25.
Second. Been moved and second. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're on to our next item, which is award a contract for our capital project management services.
So I'd ask Steve Dickey, our Director of Transportation Development, to please come forward.
Good evening, President Krebs and members of the board. I am here this evening to present to you the question of shall the board authorize the general manager to negotiate a contract with Mott McDonald LLC for the provision of project management services associated with the delivery and completion of capital projects for the Salem area mass transit district in an amount not to exceed $550,000, and upon successful completion of negotiations of the final contract, to execute the contract on behalf of the district. Salem area mass transit district is in need of project management services to deliver and complete 4 projects identified in the request for proposals attachment A, pages 26 and 27. These 4 projects are the completion of the South Salem Transit Center, the bus stop improvement program, the Keizer Transit Center signalized intersection project, the replacement of in-ground lifts for the Del Webb facility, and other improvements at the Del Webb facility, such as secure access gates, auxiliary power. The reason that we need this service assistance is for the purpose of contracting for the provision of the project management services is to be able to gain the additional capacity, both in the technical capacity and also the staffing capacity, to accelerate these projects towards completion. They have fallen behind due to current changes in the position of the capital projects manager that we recently had, and then the vacancies that we had in between. And because these projects have fallen behind, we do now have a need to move these projects forward faster than in-house staff could adequately and properly manage them in order to keep them moving forward. So Salem Area Mass Transit District is seeking the availability of ongoing services as well to assist us with future projects. And the additional services will be awarded on a task order basis. The contract is a cost plus fixed fee task order contract. A copy of the draft of the contract is provided in attachment B. The fiscal impact of this proposal are associated with the contract and the project budgets for each of these projects. They will be paid through a combination of grants that are specifically associated with each of the projects, and then the local match would come from non-federal resources. An example of that above general fund would be with our South Salem Transit Center. We have a Connect Oregon grant, which is state funds that can be used to match against the federal funds also associated with that project. The local match rate will be either 20% or 10.27%, depending on the specific grant that is associated with the project. So staff recommends that the board authorize the general manager to negotiate a contract with Mott McDonald LLC for the provision of project management services associated with the delivery and completion of capital projects for the Salem Area Mass Transit District in an amount not to exceed $550,000, and upon successful completion of negotiations of a final contract, to execute the contract on behalf of the district. And one additional note is the contract that we provided was a draft. The form and substance of the contract has not been fully reviewed, and that review received yet from legal counsel. So that is part of this process of the general manager working with those negotiations.
Okay, do we have any questions, or Dr. Evans?
Well, it says not to exceed the 550, and the 110,000 approximately at the high side, 20%, doesn't really come out of our pocket. It comes out of grant money that's acquired. The 20% of 550,000 is 110,000.
The local match rate would be 20% for the total project. That would. So you're relating the 550,000 of the project management costs.
Yes, which is 5% of the total, approximately. Of the total cost of the project.
Okay.
The 550 is about 5%, 5.1.
Right. The 550 is related to the 5% of overall total project estimated cost for all 4 projects.
So what you're saying is that the money is not really coming from us, but it's coming from grants that we acquire.
The majority of the funding would be through the grants.
Okay.
But there is some funding which we have already budgeted that would be the match against those grants.
Yeah, I looked at the.
Is budgeted in our capital projects budget.
I looked at the hourly on some of those job descriptions, and they're like $260, $68 per hour for a manager position. There are a lot of listed job descriptions there that seems like that 550 would be eaten up. 550,000 would be eaten up before we could get all the projects done.
Well, actually, when you're looking at the detail of this project, those costs, hourly costs, one of the things you have to realize is those numbers include overhead and additional that's profit and overhead.
Right.
That's included in that.
Yeah.
The top rate that you're looking at is the principal. The principal typically is the minimal number of hours.
Sure.
The bulk of your hours are your mid-level and lower, or where the majority of your hours are built.
So you think that 550 will do it?
Yes, that is an industry standard that you see pretty common in major transit projects as a 5% of overall project cost.
Okay.
Is typically more than adequate.
All right.
And the billing rates that you are seeing are very common billing rates. These are rates that were just recently audited by ODOT. Mott McDonald also provides project management services for ODOT projects, TriMet, C-Tran, and they just within the last few months actually had these rates audited, their overhead rates and their profit rates.
That's what I wanted to hear.
Yes.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Director Rogers?
Ladies first. Mott McDonald, you sort of answered it. I was going to ask what kind of experience and projects have they done? You mentioned ODOT.
They have done a number of private-public partnership projects with ODOT. They were project manager on the TriMet Orange Line, the Portland-Milwaukee light rail project. They were project managers on the C-Tran BRT line project. They were project manager on the C-Tran Fisher's Landing extension project for their Fisher's Landing Transit Center. They did a super stop project, which is for C-Tran, which was building large oversized stops for their high demand locations for C-Tran. So they have a significant amount of experience in working not just with transportation projects, but also with public transportation projects as well.
Thank you.
Yes, Director Kelly?
I'm sort of glad you pointed out this is not a contract to be executed since it says the Tri-County Metropolitan Transportation District of Oregon on the sample contract.
Just a sample.
I too am a bit, I'm just a little concerned. They seem to be very large. Are they going to be in Salem, or are they going to be commuting up and down the freeway from Portland for all of this time?
They have staff that will be located here as needed. They have staff in Portland. Some of the subcontractors that they're working with, actually, their offices are located here in Salem, such as Universal Field Services. Their offices are in Salem. They have made a commitment to make sure that staff will be available. One of the reasons that we looked at this firm and a firm of this size is we need the capacity to have a firm that has the staffing capacity to manage these 4 projects concurrently, not consecutively. We need them to be able to have staff that can oversee property acquisition at the same time that they have staff in the field monitoring and managing construction and reviewing and following up on construction sites. At the same time working with the development teams that are doing engineering and design. So we need to have that capacity, but also the capacity that when we don't need that much support and work during the phases where we need a minimal amount, they have the capacity then to scale back and are not dependent upon our work alone to support those employees. Those employees then can be reassigned to other projects as needed. So they have the flexibility to do something like that, whereas a smaller firm that then would hire a significant amount of staff would then really be depending upon our work, and at the times when we don't need all that, often you get into a situation like that, you're more likely to have billing for things just to keep people busy, and that's not what we want. We want to be able to grow and shrink the number of people that we have working on our projects as we need those resources available to us.
Director Rogers?
Do you know what their safety record is like?
We have not gotten to that level of negotiation, but given that they have worked extensively with ODOT, with C-Tran, with TriMet, and we have followed up when we did reference checks, there was no information ever provided that raised any concerns about safety issues.
Okay.
Director Bush?
Just a note, we received an extra email with an updated contract, not from the one that's in the actual packet. And that it still had some things that needed to be worked on, so
Yes.
that's why our general manager is going to work on those details for us.
Yes, we are actively working with our legal counsel to address the issues that were identified in the emails, as well as some specific details that were addressed by our legal counsel, Mr. Featherston, as well.
Other comments or questions? Are we ready for a motion?
I move that the board authorize the general manager to negotiate a contract with Mott McDonald LLC for the provision of project management services associated with the delivery and completion of capital projects for the Salem Area Mass Transit District in an amount not to exceed $550,000, and upon successful completion of negotiations of a final contract, to execute the contract on behalf of the district.
I'll second.
It's been moved and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. And our next item is approval of Service Enhancement Public Input Plan.
Great. I'd ask Chris French, our senior planner, to please come on up.
Good evening, President Krebs, members of the board. I'm here this evening to talk to you about service expansion plan and public outreach. We're asking that the board direct the general manager to prepare a draft plan for board review this fall in preparation for public outreach in January and February of 2018 in regards to service enhancement associated with the state's transportation fund revenue. With the discussion that's been had already today about the House Bill 2017 and the money that we'll be getting for service, the planning or staff has initiated the planning process to enhance Chariot service. Planning staff has started developing an initial plan for service enhancement project for the board's discussion. The focus of this plan is to enhance service, focusing on Saturday, Sunday, and holiday and weeknight service to provide better service to our current riders. A secondary goal is for making the district service more useful to those who don't ride and for current infrequent riders. Staff recommends the board hold a retreat this fall to refine the service enhancement proposal in preparation for public outreach process. Although in the moving forward process that we did for the second part for the funds that we were hoping to get with the ballot measure that was in 2015, we feel that it's important for us to reach out to the community to make sure that we are providing the service that they want with the dollars that we're going to get. In Table 2, we have a draft of some public outreach that we will be doing. We could add additional outreach will be added to this, but this is kind of just a draft to kind of show you kind of our plan as to where we're going. And with some of the events, with the weather, we could end up having to move to other locations. Staff recommends the board direct the general manager to prepare a draft plan for board review in preparation for public outreach this winter regarding the service enhancements associated with the state transportation fund revenue.
Thank you. And I understand that this is something that is going to be required of us by the legislation, that we have to do this outreach to make sure that we're serving the people that need our service. So.
Well, yeah, not only that, but there's also the requirement of an advisory committee, which is yet to be determined what that's going to look like. So what we're doing is the prep work, preparing, so when that committee is established, that we're ready to present options to them to recommend to you for approval.
So is there any, yes, Director Kelly.
I have two suggestions on adding some potential locations fairly close to us. Faculty and students at Willamette University. Willamette's one of the largest non-government employers in the city. And they used to have a bus pass program when we had a robust service. And it was my understanding there were a fair number of faculty who were really pleased to have that bus pass program in Salem Hospital. They're two large employers, and I think that it would be wise to reach out to them, because I know that some of their employees are fairly low paid, you know, when we're talking janitorial staff, et cetera, and so they would probably most likely qualify on the low income. And but it's, you know, sort of a non-brainer to ask your local university that's 2 blocks away and has a much more open living environments, like everybody doesn't have to live on campus like when I went to school.
Thank you. Yes, Director Lincoln.
One more suggestion. Contact with DAS, I would think, might be a good idea, especially, I mean, now maybe we've even converted some state employees to bus riders, but they don't, since they don't have the bus pass anymore, that doesn't mean they're not going to ride the bus, and maybe it would be good to get some input from them.
And just like people at the hospital, there are folks who work for the state in some positions who would qualify for low income.
So some of the discussion that's been going on since the staff memo came out is and actually you're getting into your retreat work, but one of that is to, in addition, this was really the general public outreach plan, is to look at having one or two, some targeted outreach to certain constituent groups, our partners, i.e. Salem Health. But Willamette, I don't know was on there or not, but the idea is so that these partners can then participate, similar to when we had Jarrett Walker here, and they did the partners work session, in addition to public outreach. So we didn't really mention that there. So, but we will have those plans together for the retreat to get further input, like you did tonight.
Yes, Director Bush.
This will enhance our core network too, the process that we went through last month. It's called.
The core net, could you repeat it? I heard the core
Oh,
net.
sorry, this would enhance the core network plans as well, because it's adding to it and say this is what's important and what's not going to go away if things change.
Yes, so with our planning process that we're working on, we're focusing, using the core network to kind of drive our plan, as well as the rest of the system. But we want to make sure that as we add the Saturday and Sunday service and holiday service, that we have that as part of the focus, is that core network.
So, any other comments? Do we have a motion?
Hello. I move the board direct the general manager to prepare a draft plan for board review in preparation for public outreach this winter regarding the service enhancements associated with the State Transportation Improvement Fund revenue.
Second that.
It's been moved and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And I believe I'm the next item on the agenda, which is the appointment of board members to committee assignments. And I think we'll just keep this short, and basically, according to the committees, the Rule 22A and the committees in the board's bylaws, the president from time to time shall appoint members to various committees, and so that's what I'm doing tonight for the next biennium. I am appointing board members to committees and subcommittees assignments as listed in Attachment A. And I believe since you have copies of that, I won't go through the and read them all off. But and there are a couple unique things this year because of certain board members holding offices. There will be a couple changes in January rather than right now. But the board member taking over in January as the primary on that committee probably wants to attend those meetings, so they're up to speed when January takes effect. So with that, we're into the next item, which is the September 2017 service change briefing.
So as you recall, we had stated that prior to each service change will come, even if there isn't a major service change to be conducted, come and provide update to you so you're the month prior to a service change, so you're aware of the changes that are happening.
President, members of the board. Every 4 months, in January, May, and September, Chariots implements service changes based on input from customers, transit operators, Chariots employees, and performance monitoring results. So I'm here today just to give a quick update on what's going to take place on September 5th, which is the day after Labor Day. So to start off, there are a few changes that are actually already in effect as detours, and they'll become permanent changes reflected on the schedules starting September 5th. As of July 17th, Route 1X no longer serves local stops in Wilsonville. All trips go straight to Wilsonville Station. And that was a recommendation from SMART, which is our partner on the 1X in Wilsonville, in order to allow for more flexible routing throughout Wilsonville due to all the traffic that's happening right now. It's best to have different options for routing to and from the station, depending on the time of the day. Also, as of July, we no longer circle through Kingwood West and Capitol Manor with Route 17. Instead, the facilities have 15-minute service at their entrances, but we no longer go through the parking lots, which originally came from a request from Kingwood West when they were doing construction and repaving their parking lot. One big change, as was mentioned before, is the state bus pass program has not been renewed by the state legislature. And that also includes, that's both the bus pass program for the employees, as well as the Route 15X, which is the route that serves the airport road park and ride and brings all members of the public to the Capitol Mall. So the state bus pass program, we honored through the end of July, and that no longer is in existence. And the Route 15X will run through the end of next week. And then starting September 5th, it will no longer be running. We've also made an effort to improve reliability. So, as you might remember, back in January, we split a bunch of our crosstown routes and added more time onto them to increase reliability on the main 15-minute service crosstown routes going through downtown. And since then, we've evaluated on-time performance on all of our routes and looked for some of the loose ends to clean up. So there's a few small minor changes we've made in order to help with on-time performance on particular trips, on particular routes. So one thing we've done is interlining some routes, which means taking some of the two different routes, and a bus will, for example, start as Route 2, and then it'll run on Route 5, and then go back to Route 2. So we're able to take routes that are a little bit tighter on time at times of the day, and then routes that have more slack in them, and combine them to give the operator a little bit of relief. So if the route's a little bit more tight, they're not constantly, not having time to use the bathroom or take a break in between trips. So that will happen on Route 2 and 5. They'll be interlined all day. And then on Route 9 and 17, those will be interlined during the PM hours, from 2 to 7 p.m. Number 2, we've made minor schedule adjustments to the Route 9 to help that route keep on time. Number 3, we split one of the blocks on Route 7. So today the way it works, there's one bus that runs every hour on Route 7 throughout the entire day. One of the issues we have is the trip that arrives downtown at 5:20. There's so much traffic on Mission, particularly for that trip, that the bus has issues getting in on time, which means it's difficult for that operator to start the 5:30 trip going back outbound. So all we're doing is when that operator comes in a little after 5:20, that their trip will end and they'll actually head back to the garage. A little bit before that, another operator will come and bring another bus from their garage, and they're able to start that 5:30 trip on time. So we think that'll help with that one trip in particular, which is the issue on that route. And number 4, we're adding some extra deadhead time to some of our routes. So as I mentioned, the deadhead time is the time when the bus goes from the facility to the start of the operator's trip, and then in reverse as well. So based on some feedback from operators for times where they said traffic's increased, we used to be able to do this in 8 minutes, and now it takes 12. We've made a number of adjustments to help set those operators up for success. And then we have 2 other small changes just to improve rider experience. We will be serving the Church and Center bus stop on Route 2 going outbound. And on the last trip of Route 5, there's a small one-way loop at the end. And an operator pointed out that for the very last trip of the day, we currently ended at the beginning of the loop. So we were actually extending the trip to go throughout the entire loop. So if anyone lives within that loop and they need to get home at the last trip of the day, they aren't left at the beginning of the loop. There are many ways that we have promoted these changes to our riders. I'll just list through some of them. We have our chariots.org/changes webpage that we use every 4 months to let people know about the latest changes. It's kind of the home base for all the details of the changes. And that's actually featured on our homepage. We have monitor ads at the Downtown Transit Center and Keizer Transit Center. There are header cards on the buses, take ones on the buses with more details, notices on affected bus stops. A new thing we're doing this time is sandwich boards out on the Downtown Transit Center Mall in advance of the service change. Just a few of them placed on the center island to let people know these changes are coming, kind of like a bus stop notice, but for the transit center. We have, we'll also have a sandwich board at the Airport Road Park and Ride. We have customer service posters in the lobby. We've notified the Statesman Journal and Keizer Times. We have service advisors on the website. We send out an email blast to all of our subscribers and social media posts on Facebook and Twitter. So overall, this should be a relatively straightforward service change. We don't anticipate any barriers to having a successful implementation. I can take any questions if anyone has
Any questions?
questions or comments.
Director Bush?
So back on Route 7, when they're coming in Highway 22 to the, what if the person that's on this bus wants the one that's actually leaving at 5:30 to get to the rest of the route? Does that make them late on their route? Because they'll have to take the next.
You're saying if they were coming inbound on the 7 towards downtown, and then they want to now go outbound on the same bus?
Right.
So
Is it, because doesn't that one continue on to West Salem?
No, so that's the Route 17. Yeah, so they can transfer the Route 17, which actually runs every 15 minutes. So if they're working in late enough to miss that bus, there's another one in 15 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? I think it looks like these are fairly simple changes. There's not any major.
January will be a little bigger with the West Salem changes.
Mhm.
So,
Okay. Thank you.
thanks.
And now we're into reports, and the first one is our trip choice report.
So we'll ask Roxanne Belts to please come up and present the report. So we went a little out of order in moving to the presentation.
Oh, that's right, the microphone's hot tonight, so I should leave it there, is that correct?
Yes.
So good morning, President Krebs. Good morning. Good evening, President Krebs, members of the board. I'm here to present the Trip Choice fourth quarter report. As I always start out with the number of total users we have in DriveLess Connect, which is our online ride matching database that we use throughout the state of Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. The numbers remain fairly steady in terms of our steady users. As you'll hear just a little bit, we do have our challenge coming up, so that's always an opportunity for us to increase the number of people in the database. Number of new users in the fourth quarter, 88. That's fairly typical for the fourth quarter of any given year. Those numbers, again, will go up next quarter as we hit into our challenge. Excuse me. Match results are always important. We want to make sure that if people are using the database, when they run a ride match, they actually get results that say, here are some people that you could ride with, carpool with. Numbers are a little lower than I would like, but again, that's why we're really pushing the challenge this time around to see if we can increase those numbers again. More people in the database, more matches, more people can get into carpools. A few things I want to share with you. You all should have at your seat the new marketing collateral that we've come up with. There will be 3 brochures in total for the Trip Choice program. This is specifically featuring our carpool and vanpool program. The second brochure that I'm working on currently is featuring our bicycling and walking program. And then the third brochure will be focused on our employer services. And I would welcome if you have any questions about this, please feel free. Another thing that I want to make sure you're all aware of is the Open Streets Salem. It used to be called Salem Open Streets. There's a number of different iterations that we've participated in this function. This will be the 4th year. It will be held in the Grant Highland neighborhood. Maps will be available on their Facebook page. It is Saturday as opposed to Sunday. Used to be Salem Sunday Streets, so now it is a Saturday. Our program, the Trip Choice program, will be doing a bike safety awareness outreach. Will be at Broadway Commons. We're working with the Salem Fire Department to do a bicycle helmet giveaway for kids. And we're also going to be doing what's called a melon drop, where we'll take a melon to the top of a ladder and drop it off to show kids this is what can happen if you fall off your bike without a helmet.
Ooh.
It's very dramatic, and the kids love it. And we even have some folks that are going to take the splattered pieces of melon home to feed their goats. So no waste there. We completed the poster contest in this quarter. As you're aware, every year we go out to the local middle and high school students in Polk, Marion, and Yamhill County. We give them a theme. This year it was, "Oh, the places you will go." We give them some ideas what we'd like in our posters, and then we go out and we recognize the students that turned in the posters that the judges voted for. So I'll go through these quickly. 3rd place, we had Lisbeth at Talmadge Middle School. Third place in the high school division was Cody at Sprague. Wonderful imagery, all sorts of different places that he would love to go. 2nd place was another Talmadge Middle School student, Marley H. She drew a beautiful dragon, and it was very fantasy oriented. The judges just loved that. 2nd place was McGlacy at Sprague High School. 1st place from middle school, if you can believe that, was Azim at Judson Middle School. The more you look at it, the more art you see in it. It's just a wonderful poster. And then 1st place was South Salem High School, Maya M., who drew this beautiful flowered rainbow poster. And as you know, we use these posters in our calendar every year. There were also 7 honorable mentions, and those will also be in the calendar. So 12 months with pictures and then 1 cover photo. So that'll be coming out soon. And then, as I mentioned, the Driveless Challenge. All of you should have a card, again, at your desk talking about the Oregon Driveless Challenge. It is a statewide challenge. We like folks to sign up into Driveless Connect, join the challenge, log their trips, whether that's biking, walking, and whether it's weekend trips. Basically, any trip they take between the 16th and the 30th where they're using an alternative mode, carpooling, vanpooling. There are a number of prizes that are available on a statewide level. We've been promoting this through a number of the participating partners. Providence Health is a new participating partner, and we've reached out to the representative in Newburgh, which is one of our areas for Providence, and then all of Yamhill County. So we're doing some outreach a little bit further out in the county than we've done in the past. So we'll be working with their employees to build their program. And our sustainability team here at Chariots is also going to be promoting this challenge internally, so all of our employees will get involved as well. So we'll have our own team. And with that, I would take any questions.
Do we have any questions? Oh, Director Lincoln.
So are you working with the hospital, or what's the relationship with the hospital? Are they into the challenge?
With most of the major employers in our area, we always go out, give them copies of this, set up in their lobby if they allow us to, and get people to sign up right there. We let them know what the prizes are for signing up. The nice blue tote bag that I think President Krebs walked in with, that's one of the items that we actually give to people if they sign up into Driveless Connect and sign up for the challenge. So we work with all of the area employers.
Do you get
give
much
them
participation
for their newsletters? Oh,
I'm sorry. Do you get much participation from hospital employees?
Typically, yes. We usually get about 500 or 600 employees overall in our region participating. They've done teams in the past. This year, it's pretty much every person for himself. So there'll be a lot of competition. Groups like Garmin, they love to compete against one another. So those are the employers that we work with.
Thanks. Good job.
Thank you.
Yes. Director Rogers?
I probably get the answer by looking up Driveless Connect, but if I'm driving by myself in a carpool, that counts as getting points or whatever, correct?
So you just said driving by
Well,
yourself.
if I'm driving my car to work And then I look at this and say, oh, I'm going to carpool now. And so I start carpooling. So that counts as points to build up for prizes.
If you're currently in your car and you add people into your car for your trip, which makes a carpool, yes,
Okay.
that would make you eligible.
And what about I'm already carpooling?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Yes, if you're already carpooling, you simply enter the information.
I didn't know if there was a baseline to start with and work your way up.
No, we want to recognize people that are doing it now as well.
Oh.
Hopefully you're already in Drive Less Connect, but if you're not, it'd be great to sign up.
I'm not. Keep it with me.
Well, thank you. It's always good to get a very positive report, and
Thank you.
now we're ready for the performance report.
Right. And I'll ask Matt Bergen to come back up.
Love the end. So tonight I'm going to present on the fiscal year 17 quarter four performance report, which covers the months of April through June 2017, comparing data from April through June 2016. So starting with changes by service. For the Chariot's local bus service, we have a 5.7% increase in revenue hours per day, or 5% increase in revenue hours total, and a 1.8% increase in revenue miles. This is mostly a result of the reliability enhancements we started in January to increase the on-time performance of our routes. And good news, for the first time over a quarter, I can tell you we have an increase in boardings per day as well. So we have a 4.9% increase in boardings on the local bus service for fiscal year 17 quarter four compared to fiscal year 16 quarter four. So that's pretty exciting. And in future slides, I'll show you some of the details, some of the charts showing month-by-month comparisons. So Chariot's regional, this includes what were formerly the CARTS routes, and then also the 1X and 2X. This is a trend that we've been seeing for a while, a decrease in boardings. Actually, though, the boardings, we were seeing about a 10% or so decrease before the change in May, from the deviated fixed routes to the fixed routes, and that stayed about the same or actually decreased a little bit. So we're going to have to wait a few more months to actually get more data on how those routes are doing. And the revenue hours and miles have dropped slightly as well. The Chariot Shopping Ride, which is formerly the Red Line, has very slight increases in boardings. It's a 15% increase in boardings, but that's only 5 additional boardings per day, which if you're doing a round trip is 2.5 people. So very small service. So the numbers look really big, but not actually that big. It's essentially staying about stable. And the revenue miles and revenue hours have also increased in relation to the boardings. Chariot's Lift, the amount of boardings have continued to drop as we've seen for the last 2 years or so. So there's a 4.3% drop in boardings. There's a similar corresponding decrease in revenue hours, but the revenue miles are up slightly. And some of that has to do with depending on what types of trips they are, how far away they are. With demand response service, sometimes things can fluctuate a little bit. So this is the chart that I've been showing for the last 1.5 years or so. So as you can see, in March of 2015, we started to lose riders. Then in September of 2015, with moving forward with the system redesign, we had a pretty large drop in ridership. And we've continued to have drops in ridership year over year, every single month since then, until a slight uptick in November, went back down again. But then starting in March of 2017, we saw an increase every month. So 1.8% increase in March, and April as well, 5.7% in May, and 7.3% in June. So we're back into the positive territory of increasing ridership. As I mentioned in the past, some of a percent of the decreases in ridership before was from creating those crosstown routes and reducing transfers. With the changes in January, we split some of the routes and increased some of the transfers as well. So there's a little bit of that going on. There's also the state legislative session that was in session, so that could have had an impact on the overall ridership as well, with more people being in Salem. So the gray line at the top is fiscal year 15. Then the dark blue line is fiscal year 16. So that's the average number of boardings per day. We show you over the year, as we have seasonal fluctuations. We tend to have increases through October, It drops in December around the holidays, increases up through February to around April, drops again in the summer. So we saw a similar pattern for fiscal year 16, but with lower number of riders. The first part of fiscal year 17, we were pretty much on track with fiscal year 16. But as you can see, for the last few months, we've actually started to work our way back towards the levels of fiscal year 15. So we're not quite there yet, but if we continue this positive trend of increase, we'll work our way back there and then hopefully beyond that. So some of the changes by route. So just 3 things I want to highlight. All of the 15-minute service, Route 2, 11, 19, 21, 5, and 17 have all seen increases in ridership, which is a really good sign. So those are the routes that we put 15-minute service on all these routes because we thought there was the biggest potential for ridership increases. We wanted to provide the best possible service that we could using our budget. Another route that's doing really well, even though it doesn't have 15-minute service, it only has 30-minute service, are routes 8 and 18. They were up more than any other 30-minute service route in the double digits. And then another thing to note is Route 12. We saw that big decrease, 40–45%, after we were no longer able to bring Route 12 directly in front of Chemeketa Community College. So back in May, we did an extension where we brought it closer to Chemeketa again, but then we also now serve Silverton and Lancaster, getting closer to Safeway and other stores on those places. But we still haven't seen many results from that. So the drop in that's still in the 30s. So there's not been that hasn't had a significant impact on the ridership of that route. For the regional routes, the intercity routes, I'm not going to focus on this too much because we're still verifying some of the data with our contractor, so I'm just going to skip past this. And for our flex routes and our demand response routes, our Polk County Flex has seen a drop in ridership with the changes in May, so we're going to keep following that over the next few months. West Salem Connector is on par with where it was last year. The shopper shuttle portion of the shop and ride is up slightly. The Chariots Lift is on par with last year, and the shop and ride dial ride portion is also up slightly. But like I said before, these are very small services, so very small increases and decreases. Generally, we're about on par with where we were last year for all the demand response systems in terms of efficiency. And then finally, the State Bus Pass program at Route 15X. This will be the last time I have these slides on the quarter reports. But just so you're aware, the State Bus Pass program continues to be around 3% of our overall ridership. And Route 15X had a big boost during the legislative session, so we were at around 3 or 4 boardings per hour before then, and then starting with the session in January, we got up to closer to 6 to 7. So that route will continue into July and August, and then end in September. Are there any questions?
It would be interesting to look at on our peaks and our valleys, the boardings by month. It would be interesting to look at the gas price.
Throughout the month?
Well, if you could track the gas prices.
We've done that before for this chart, looking at the gas prices, how it affects. So we could take a look at that again and see how things have changed.
Because I know that the price of gas has been fairly low, and that always impacts our ridership, especially when we can't put as much ridership out there. So it would be interesting to know that as the gas prices are going up, whether we're capturing some of those folks who look at their wallet.
It's definitely a factor.
And the other comment would be with the Chemeketa, and you said you hadn't seen any increases really there from the changes made in May. The heavy student involvement is September through June. They do have classes in the summer, but I don't think it's as robust because I think a fair number of people work so that they can then go back to school in the fall. So
Right.
I wouldn't worry about that one too much.
Right, so this was April through June. So as you're kind of saying, it was the tail end of the school year, so people probably weren't going to change their travel patterns. But when school starts back up and people are starting new classes, then they might look into routes and find that the route well works for them.
Yes,
That'll be
it-
interesting to see once school's in session.
It does look like there are some dips in here when school is out, like in the middle of December. There's a 2-week school vacation, so
Yeah.
that could impact other things, people going on vacation and so forth, because students are,
Right, also September, Chemeketa is not in session normally until the very end of September, so definitely Chemeketa ridership, high school ridership has a big impact on our riders. It's a pretty big portion of our.
I know in my neighborhood, I see a lot of students at the rural and commercial.
Yeah.
A lot. Just
other comments or questions? Well, it looks like we're doing, the numbers are increasing except for the rural, or the regional service, and I'm optimistic that will come back in the fall when people understand that the buses now run on a more designated schedule, and you don't have the route deviation where there could be anywhere from 15 to half-hour difference in the arrival time. So now the buses arrive pretty much on time.
There's only about a little less than 2 months of data in here from the legal service. It's a brand new service, it's different, so it's going to take more time to do a proper analysis of how it's doing.
Yeah.
But I think it is a testament to our improvements in reliability that we've done on the local system, some of the increases in the ridership. We've heard a lot of good things from the community about that, from the riders about that change.
Well, that's good. Any other questions? Oh, well, thank you very much.
Thanks.
And now we're ready for committee reports. And the first one is the Special Transportation Fund Advisory Committee.
No meeting.
No meeting. And the Mid-Willamette Area Commission on Transportation.
we had a very robust meeting for the first part of August. First of all, we had a briefing on the Department of Transportation's plans on addressing eclipse traffic and things that were happening and the deployment that they were going to do with vehicles in order to minimize weights as much as possible. But given people's propensities, I think that they did it themselves. They just wanted to be able to respond to traffic accidents especially. And we had a briefing on the Oregon 22 Safety Project, which is a discussion that's been ongoing for, I think, probably 10 years, maybe 12 years. Especially, it's the Dokes Ferry Highway 22 intersection that is a real concern to folks. And so there has been progress on that. And so we learned where they are in that process. The other thing we talked about this, every 3 years, the state has a statewide transportation improvement program called the STIP. And you just about find out what is in the STIP for 18 to 21. I think it's still on the commission's desk for the final approvals. And the process is starting up for the 21 to 24 STIP. Always doing planning. We're included in the STIP because all federal dollars have to be included, not always in discussion, however. We had a briefing on, guess what, the Oregon Legislature's transportation bill. And then a discussion on topics for future WAC meetings. And there was some question on whether there was going to be a September meeting, but there will be a September meeting for WAC on the 7th. And we had the area manager for our area, Tim Potter, retired at the end of June. And so we have an interim, Lisa Neal, and she was pretty much on the agenda for partially because of her involvement in the process as well. So she's going to try us out. So the region manager was there to introduce her, and we don't always get a chance to see him. So Sonny was there this year. And I think that's about all that happened.
Okay, the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments.
And we had no meeting.
And the Salem Keizer Area Transportation Study Policy Committee had no meeting, and the Oregon Metropolitan Planning Organization Consortium had no meeting. So I guess we are through with those, so I will call on our general manager for his report.
Thank you. So I've asked a couple of people to present updates for you on my behalf. So first I'll ask David Trimble to do an eclipse update.
Thank you. Thank you, General Manager Pollock. Good evening, President Krebs, members of the board. I did want to provide a quick update on our eclipse activities because, as you know, there was a lot of buzz, and so I want to tell you, give you a status of how we did and some observations, etc. So I think it was a very successful event. We were prepared pretty much for any eventuality that could have arose. As you know, the team began planning for many, many months before the eclipse in cooperation with our external partners, so it's really good. And as I reported in the August work session, we distributed a flood of information, both internally and externally, via Take One notifications, channel cards on buses, other information boards, sandwich boards actually at transit centers, as well as media interviews. So I think our stakeholders were very well informed with any potential service delays that could have arose on that day. So on Eclipse Day, we engaged our Emergency Operations Center, our EOC. We initiated that at 6 a.m. We were all there and prepared for the exciting day with our first coordination call at 6:15 a.m. Everyone was in place where they needed to be, and we were ready to respond. Just as a note, the EOC was led by Karen Garcia, who spoke earlier, who's our Security and Emergency Management Manager. And I did want to say she did an absolute excellent job serving as the incident commander and ensuring that all the moving parts were very well coordinated for a seamless service day. Great thanks to the location captains who were stationed at the transit centers to help ensure that customers and employees were up to date with any service changes or service delays that we had. So it was really, really great. I also need to say a special kudos to our communication division, who was embedded in our EOC, and that individual was really able to maintain our website and maintain social media with all of our service alerts. So again, people were very, very well informed. We also had extra personnel available on telephones and customer service at the Chariot's call center and at transit centers to reassure customers if buses were late and reassuring them that their buses would show up at some point. Now, the eclipse was beautiful, and I admit I had a personal moment, and that was great. However, soon thereafter, traffic became problematic, and oddly enough, it became problematic in Keizer. Which we weren't necessarily anticipating. We didn't think Keizer would sort of be the pinch point. There were lots of things going on in Keizer. At Keizer Station had significant crowds due to events that they had in parking lots and at stores at Keizer Station, and also there was a large event at the Volcano Stadium. So that made servicing our Keizer transit station and Keizer Station very difficult. So we did end up detouring a few routes to get around that. After about 2.5 hours or so, it did settle down, so we were able to stagger buses back in for that service. I-5 was problematic much of the afternoon, especially going northbound, and obviously that affected our 1X routes, which were late. The first two afternoon routes, beginning at 3:30 going northbound, were quite crowded. I think everyone wanted to try to leave town at the same time. Also, there were quite a number of individuals with bicycles, and we do have a finite number of bicycle spaces on our vehicles. So those were some interesting discussions with all the individuals trying to leave with their bicycles at the same time. But we had a plan in place, and we were ready to add additional service. Excuse me. So we actually set in a couple of vehicles, which means we initiated vehicles here at the transit center because we knew operators would not be able to get up to, on the 1X, would not be able to get up to Wilsonville and back because of the traffic. So we didn't want to compound the issue by having the operator going up there, getting stuck, and not being able to leave on the second trip back. So we were actually able to set in some service, trying to maintain our on-time performance for that day. So as a note, speaking of the 1X, one of our operators let us know, and we found it very interesting, that most of the people on the 1X, most of the customers that day were paying cash fares, which indicated to us that these were not necessarily regular commuters that were coming down that day. Lots of people that were coming down just for that event. So we did notice an influx of cash-paying customers. So I just thought that was an interesting note that I'd like to share with you. We did have some delays on the 10X to Woodburn and Silverton with the 20X. The 40 going to Dallas, Independence, and Monmouth got a little behind because of traffic, significant traffic on Highway 22 as well. There were no issues on Chariot's lift, nor were there any significant issues on Chariot's shop and ride. The good thing is a lot of the work sites canceled their appointments for that day and didn't have their workers show up for the DD53 program and such. So there was a lot of availability and capacity on Chariot's lift and Chariot's shop and ride that day. So it was certainly busy, however, not quite the Armageddon that everyone thought it was going to be, but certainly there were a few challenges. We did not receive any significant customer complaints. However, we did receive one customer comment that I didn't want to share with the board because once we heard that customer commendation, it really sort of substantiated the good feeling we felt about the work that we did. So if you would indulge me for one moment, I'd like to read that to you. Oh, God. So there was an elderly gentleman, approximately 80 years old, and he self-identified. We're not making any assumptions. That rode our bus that day during the eclipse. He told the operator that he had ridden buses all over, including TriMet, actually on Eclipse Day. And he was more impressed with Chariots than any other service that he has ever ridden. And specifically, he stated the following: "Your drivers are so nice and courteous. The buses are so neat and clean." Actually, an operator who was out of service, read out of service on his bus, stopped and picked him up as he looked very confused. That was the best bus service I've ever ridden. And the best thing about his trip to Oregon was his experience on a Chariot's bus. So we felt really good about that. So again, that validates sort of the hard work and planning that we had. So again, a personal thanks to everyone that was involved in the process, and I think all the planning that we did really helped for a really successful post-event. Thank you.
Thanks. And then I'd ask Patricia Feeney to give an update on our onboard advertising.
I'm going to come up because I have art. President Krebs and members of the board, as you know, we are contracting with Stott Outdoor Advertising, so I just wanted to give you a quick update on where we are and the progress we're making. So Stott has secured space in downtown Salem, right above Goose. They have identified and hired a representative from the local area that's going to do their marketing representation. They've completed all the inventory of the fleet, done all the photography, and as early as next month, you will begin seeing these promotional ads for the busadsrock.com campaign. So these ads with all these charming, cute little people. So I'm going to pass this to Linda, and I just made one packet, but if you're interested in getting those electronically, I'm happy to send them to you. So we have movement. It's a go. Any questions? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Well, I do have a couple more things. So first, let me echo David's comments about Eclipse Day. That was one of those days that unremarkable was good. And so, and it was because we were prepared and planned and ready to go. So my hat's off to everyone. I was stationed out here, and during the actual eclipse, it was great to be with fellow employees. It was kind of one of those things you thought was pretty neat until it happened, and then it was really neat. And it was good to share that with fellow employees. Also, just a reminder, on September 16th is the bus rodeo, our local bus rodeo, which is an employee-only event. So if your schedule allows to come by and watch the competition, that would be great. And just to let you know, earlier today we submitted two 5339 bus and bus facility grant applications to the FTA. One was for 6 compressed natural gas buses, and the other was for the South Salem Transit Center funding. So we'll probably know outcome on those in a few months. And we're also, as you know, we previously submitted for the low-no electric buses, and we haven't heard when they may make an announcement, but I would expect it to be late September, early October, right around the APTA conference. That's usually a good announcement time for transit stuff. And with that concludes my report.
Thank you. I was involved in a lot of activities this month, but I'm going to just talk about the significant ones. I represented, along with Director Lincoln, I represented the board at the groundbreaking ceremony for the Cornerstone Apartment dedication. This is a low-cost housing project that's taking place up on Portland Road, and of course we have 15-minute service past that location, so we will help support that, and that's the first one of these projects using the state LIFT program that has started in the state, and it's moving forward quite rapidly. So this will help address our housing problem in Salem. Also, I have had quite a few inquiries, both at neighborhood meetings and I was on KMUZ radio to discuss the when we plan to put out Saturday service, and of course we're still working on that, but hopefully we'll have a plan here in a few months, and that's what we discussed earlier tonight on when that service will take effect. Can't take effect too soon to suit me. And with that, I'm going to I'll call on Director Evans, give our new director a chance to.
Well, August is a time when organizations take time out, so no West Salem Neighborhood Association meetings, no West Salem Business Association meetings. The regular board meeting and work session, spent time with a couple constituents, listening to their concerns. Rode for about 3 hours. I rode buses 3, 17, and 7, just to get out and spend time with the drivers and see how it works. I now give tours at the Capitol in the afternoon on Thursdays, and I spent 12 hours this last month doing that. I was there today for 3 hours. It's a nice opportunity to meet people from all around the country. Philadelphia today, and Ohio, and California, and New York. So that's kind of fun to get their reaction to our very different Capitol. It's Art Deco. I don't know if you knew that, but I do now. And then I spent time before the eclipse over at the post office on 25th, canceling envelopes with the eclipse day, stamping them precisely and putting stamps on 1,000 envelopes. And that was, they were sold and are still available through this month, through the end of September at the gift store at the Capitol. You can get an envelope that's been canceled on the day of the eclipse, and it's kind of a cool design. Those are available over there. So that's about it.
Director Lincoln?
Well, it has been kind of a slow month, but I did attend the Democratic Forum last week and heard Representative Kurt Schrader talk, and Director Kelly asked a good question, which he didn't have much of an answer for, about what's the future of the transportation fund, the federal transportation fund, and I guess we'll just have to wait and see about that. Attended the Area Commission on Transportation meeting that Director Kelly reported on, and the Marion County Democrats monthly meeting. The groundbreaking ceremony with Director Krebs. And I went to the OTC meeting a few weeks ago where they talked about the new transportation bill, and there's a whole slew of work that ODOT and the OTC needs to do to put flesh on these bones of the statute. So there's a whole lot of information we're all going to have to deal with and absorb in the next few months, but hopefully with a good result. So it was real interesting to see and hear their reactions to the statute. I met with a constituent who now recently moved, which isn't one of my constituents, but someone who recently moved to West Salem, and she's really excited about being in Salem, wants to get involved, and is a real supporter of the transit district. So that was nice to hear someone really positive. But I did want to say, we had some visitors with us on the day of the eclipse, and they were headed up to Portland. They thought, well, 3:30, I ought to be able to get up to Portland. Well, 2.5 hours later, they finally ditched at the Aurora exit and came back and spent another night with us. So I don't know how the 1X ever got up to Wilsonville. They should have taken that, I guess.
We detoured.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was a mess. Good job, though. That's it.
Director Thompson?
Well, it was a slow month. I did happen to hit a neighborhood meeting though this week, so they're starting up again. It's time. And that's about all I had other than the work session. We did have about a dozen people camping in our backyard. And we had about 24 over for the eclipse, and that was a wonderful experience. Fortunately, our kids had to go down to Eugene, and that only took an hour and a half when they did it about 5 o'clock in the evening. So that worked out pretty well for them.
Thank you. Director Kelly?
So the regular board meeting, the work session, this regular board meeting, the work session, I also attended the Democratic Forum because Representative Schrader was speaking. He also spoke at the Marion County Dems meeting the next evening. And I asked him about the infrastructure, and he thinks that they'll be going along, but reminded us that they did have an existing bill, and so that's about it. I've spent a little bit of time with constituents in the Area Commission on Transportation, and I attended the opening of the Peter Courtney Bridge. So ran into some folks there. If people missed it last night, Nova had a special on the eclipse, and it highlighted Salem, Oregon, although it didn't highlight Willamette University, I guess because the guy was from Williams College, who was really the star of the show there. But as a Willamette alum, I was very proud of all the scientists there. I spent the eclipse out in Turner, and people who decided to leave early, like right after the eclipse, decided to go. They live in Vancouver. We're going to go 205, and then we got a text at about 3:30 and said, we've turned around and we've decided we're going back to Woodburn and have dinner. But I had the opportunity to see the eclipse with 6 either current or former Jet Propulsion NASA employees, because our friend used to work at JPL, and so there were people there from California and all over the place who used to work, or do still currently work with stars. They are rocket engineers, after all. So.
Thank you. Director Bush, and welcome back.
Oh, thank you. I had a great time the first 2 weeks of this month. I spent in Yangon, Myanmar on a mission trip with our church. Got to see lots of different transportation modes there, mostly taxi, motorcycle, bicycle, pushing carts. Anytime you saw a bus, there's people standing, and there's 4 in a row, and everything was packed full. And the city has like 8 to 10 million people in the city, and they're still recuperating from when the hurricane went through in 2008. A lot of displaced folks, a lot of poverty, but the people are so nice and so gracious, and I had a really good time. I'm still recovering from jet lag, so I'm kind of dozing up here, trying to stay awake, and I apologize for that. But I brought a welcome. This is a Mingala bar. Their word for welcome is Mingala Ba. So this is a Mingala bar candy that we can share later. So the only thing I was able to do was go to Keizer Fire's district's board meeting and the city council, and everything else was canceled. All the greeters were canceled. And I was very glad, because I would not have been staying awake. So I'm glad to be back and glad to be the secretary now for the board and ready to go. So that's it.
Well, I'll be quick so you can go to bed.
Okay.
I probably won't stay awake.
Well, you know, where I live, the traffic wasn't bad, so after the eclipse, my wife says, I'm going to take a quick trip into Keizer to get something. And so I was in the backyard doing yard work, and after an hour and a half goes by, I think, oh, she's keeping me out here to do the whole thing, that sneaky little girl. But she came back going, I wish I was home doing yard work. Okay, August, we all said it was slow. Even my own neighborhood association said we're taking a day off, or a month off. But when things are slow, you generate your own activity. And the Brown Road Park that I live next to, a whole bunch of people from the neighborhoods were coming in to have a big party. We had the Croc Center was there, they had a table. McKay High School had a table where they are getting shoes for homeless children. And the fire truck came, and there was lights going. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to put on my badge and walk out there and hand out my cards and introduce myself to people and say, hey, if you've got problems, concerns, questions, something nice to say, I live right there. Here's my card. Let's talk transit when you've got time. And I didn't want to interrupt the party. And so I've been able to make quite a few contacts with people, and I have to say, most of the comments I've heard are about how wonderful our drivers are and the timeliness of the routes. You know, when the bus says it's going to be there, it's going to be there. And, you know, it's not everything is positive, and there were a few negative things. Like somebody who goes to Shemeketa, gets off the bus, but isn't quite fast enough to get to the transfer bus. You know, and this is something it's a legitimate concern, and something I hope we'll take seriously. If there's anything we can do to adjust routes a minute here, a minute there, maybe that would help. But the vast things that I've heard are all positive. It really makes me proud. And that's it.
Thank you. Any other comments? Or been a longer meeting tonight, but we had a lot of business. So with that, the meeting is adjourned.